This is Dr. Paul Thomlinson from Compass Health Network, and I'm doing a continuing series aimed at inspiring hope and promoting wellness, the very mission of Compass, with the goal of helping us all get through these times we're living in and living through with grace and humanity. This series is called As If Back to School Wasn't Stressful Enough: New Realities, New Stressors, and Strategies for How to Deal. Back when our kids went on what turned out to be the unending spring break of 2020, many of us couldn't have imagined the wholesale changes that have happened in our world, our communities since then. The disruption, fear, stress, illness, and even death that have seemed to pervade our lives since then. As I was preparing to write this, I did quite a few searches on back-to-school stress and stress management, and I found a lot of articles and research and advice from previous years, all of which now seems almost quaint in the era of COVID-19. In addition to all the usual suspects of stressors like readjusting expectations after summer vacation, realigning sleep schedules, getting our students back in the groove, the financial toll of school clothes and supplies, etc. Now we're doing all that in the midst of a global pandemic that makes whether in-person school is even going to be possible a big question mark, along with a very long list of other question marks and fears about whether our kids will contract the virus, whether it will be harmful to them, whether they'll bring it home to parents or grandparents who are clearly more at risk for significant illness from the virus, what to do about childcare if our students are doing school virtually at home, either partially or completely, and on and on. Suffice to say, this year is the mother of all back-to-school stress fests. So I thought I would go where I always go when I'm feeling confused or overwhelmed or need some practical answers to difficult circumstances. And remember, that's what this is. It's our current circumstances, not our whole lives. To the science of mind and behavior is where I go. So what does evidence-based psychology have to offer as we navigate this time? Well, this will be a multi-part series because there's a lot to unpack and a lot to talk about as we look to the future and some effective ways to move into it. I want to talk about how we can support our students as they experience these trying times. I want to talk about developing resilience and provide some resources on that subject in particular. And I want to encourage both parents and teachers who are looking with hope and fear at the new school year. I'm not sure how many parts this will be, in this series that is, but I want to keep listening to parents, teachers, and students as we move into the next months and respond with what I hope are helpful thoughts and recommendations based on science and other wisdom. Let's start by naming and framing one of the key stressors literally all of us are dealing with these days. The best contender for the theme of the 2020 school year, uncertainty. Facing uncertainty is one of the most distressing things we human beings have to do. Many of us value control and some kind of predictability above all else, and we feel the need to be in control. But we know it would be foolish for us to believe that we can control all of the factors in play that create uncertainty in our personal and collective futures. The point being, we will always be faced with uncertainty, so we should do everything we can to learn to sit with it and make friends with it. I've done a guided meditation on uncertainty, and you may find that resource helpful. It's one of the podcasts you can find at compasshealthnetwork.org under videos. As psychologists sometimes say, it's not about what it's about. So what is distressing about uncertainty is not so much the uncertainty itself, rather, why it feels negative is because of a pervasive and underlying fear of the unknown. Mostly because of scenarios that we allow to play out in our minds, ones that we need to acknowledge are 100% our own creation. They're stories that we've told ourselves, along with the often scary movies that accompany them in our visual brains. I think it's helpful to remember, as the wise sage Mark Twain said, "I'm an old man and I've known many difficulties, most of which never happened." But check out that meditation on uncertainty if you're struggling with it, and I hope it helps. Now let's move on to some strategies and thoughts on how we can support students as they experience the uncertainties ahead of us. Coping with staying home, maybe being in school part-time, maybe being fearful of catching or spreading the virus, etc., etc. Clearly, we and our students are living through a crisis. In addition to COVID-19, students have had increased and often relentless exposure to unsettling descriptions of racism and racial injustice in our society and the associated unrest that has resulted. No two students or families have been affected by these difficult times in the same way, but all need the support of the important adults around them, including parents and teachers. Now more than ever, we are all important parts of facilitating student learning, well-being, and growth. The first and maybe most important thing you can do to support students is, seemingly paradoxically, Focus on yourself. Remember back when we could fly on airplanes? Everyone's favorite part is the announcement at the beginning, right? In the unlikely event that the cabin should lose pressure, oxygen masks will drop from the compartment above. Be sure to affix your own mask before helping young children or others with whom you may be traveling. We know why this is important enough for an announcement, right? If we don't focus on ourselves, we very well may not be able to help anyone else, including our children. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. Parents often feel it is, but it's not. It's crucial. We know that students often determine whether a situation is scary or out of control versus manageable by observing us, trusted adults in their lives. So as we discuss some of these strategies, maybe try them on yourself first, and so that you can have firsthand experience and some data to share with them. Hey, this works. So you can convey, you got this. You have coping skills to help with situations that are beyond your control, beyond all of our control. So how do we support our children, our students right now? The American Psychological Association has some of the best research-based recommendations I've seen, so I'll summarize some of those here. First, as casually as you can, talk with your children about their understanding of and feelings about what's happening in their world. Of course, talk to each child individually, since the conversation may end up being very different, depending on their age and personality. They may have inaccurate information that makes it even more scary. I've often been astounded at the misinformation my kids have shared with me at times during this pandemic. Be ready to counter misinformation with facts and with calm reassurance that you'll be there to walk through the valley with them. Next, let your children know what you and your family can do and are in control of. For example, we can stay home, we can wear masks, we can use proper hygiene, we can do distancing, etc. And that the grown-ups have a plan to deal with the virus, even though it will take time. Now, I know that might take some work on your own behalf in order to really believe it, so just make sure you believe what you're saying before you reassure your kid. They have remarkable built-in baloney detectors, you know. Third thing, ask how your children feel about the changes in their daily activities. Some children may not be anxious because they like the extra time at home, etc. However, some children are overwhelmed by the change in their regular routine and their fears of illness and so forth. Just being able to share these feelings can be a relief for many children. So, again, by way of summary, talk to them about their understanding, tailored to their level of understanding and personality. Let them know what you and yours are doing with that which is in your control, and ask them how they're feeling about all of these things: knowledge, behavior, feelings. So, speaking of feelings, what about all the anxiety right now? How do we help children with that? We know that some kids, like some adults, are more prone to anxiety than others, but most are experiencing some worries these days. Many are wondering if the virus will harm their relatives or themselves. Some are worried that they won't be able to return to school, or won't like the new normal, or won't be able to do other activities they love and look forward to. You may see anxiety showing up in unexpected ways, like anger that you haven't seen before. So, what can you do to help? A few things. I know this sounds like the kind of thing psychologists are supposed to say, the worst kind of cliche, but first thing, validate feelings. Remind your student that no emotion is wrong or bad. If they feel uncomfortable, repeat back what you heard your child say so that he or she feels validated. There is great power in feeling heard and knowing someone you love understands what's going on in your heart and mind. It's hard these days with the number of screens floating around, but the second thing is manage the media diet of your student. Kids can get overwhelmed with media coverage, so be careful about what you have playing at your house. You should be the one who decides what sources of information to share and how much, especially with younger kids. Again, help them not drink from the fire hose. Next thing on anxiety management strategies. We know that one of the great values of school is that it forces us to create routines. Now, routines get a bad rap sometimes because, you know what, they're wonderful for mental health overall. We can easily become out of sorts, anxious, and depressed if we have no routines to follow. So create a routine, especially if your child ends up doing most or all of their schooling at home. Try to set up a regular location to do schoolwork. Stick to a predictable routine. Print up a daily schedule. During weekdays, put into the schedule lunch, recess, snack time, and then add in the academic subjects. Add in fun times. Maybe you can even add in hobby period or family game time, whatever. I know many school districts have very thoughtful curricula and recommendations and requirements that they have ready to go to adapt to our current challenges. So work with them, but focus on routine. We're just getting started on strategies. So join me for part 2 of this series, where we will talk about calming strategies, which we may need for ourselves as much as our students. We'll also talk about what to look for in identifying students in crisis, building resilience, and more on some do's and don'ts for how parents and teachers might better support our precious treasures right now in the coming months.